Health by Yourself presents How to Use Your Frolov Respiratory Training Device. Introduction. Intelligent diseases.
Breathing diseases. Again, remember that the cells are designed to operate aerobically mostly and anaerobically occasionally. But when they're forced, for whatever reason, to operate anaerobically for a long period of time, the amount of acid produced starts to overwhelm the system. Nature steps in at that point by allowing what's called hyperventilation. When you hyperventilate, you are breathing out acid indirectly in the form of carbon dioxide. This is designed to be more or less a temporary mechanism. If the hyperventilation goes on for too long, you deplete your body's carbon dioxide reserves. And when your carbon dioxide reserves fall beyond a certain point, your body's chemistry can no longer be stable. So nature's already stepped in to help us out twice. First, by allowing this anaerobic metabolism to keep us alive in this intense situation that we're in. But this can't go on for too long, so nature steps in to allow the hyperventilation to allow us to breathe out all that acid that we're producing. But this can't go on forever either. So nature steps in again, and it creates what many consider to be diseases, but what I consider to be another layer of self-protection. Disease number one. Let's first talk about sleep apnea. I find this very ironic that one of the real experts in breathing, Russian scientist Buteyko, actually developed a way to treat these breathing diseases by teaching people to hold their breath. Nature already has this treatment, and it's called sleep apnea. What better way to restore your carbon dioxide levels than simply to stop breathing? Of course, the standard treatment is to treat the apnea instead of treating the actual problem necessitating the apnea. And ironically, the standard treatment is successful in terms of stopping the apnea from happening, but you'll see that your health will further diminish even though the so-called disease now can't occur. But not to worry. Nature has so many tricks up its sleeve to keep you alive despite all this treatment that you're getting. Bronchitis. Your body produces mucus for different reasons. Obviously, whenever you have a cold or if there's any infection, your body produces mucus to trap the infection, and then you can get rid of it through your lungs. What is less known is that mucus is produced in states of low carbon dioxide. This is also logical because mucus production prevents the loss of more carbon dioxide. So sinusitis, bronchitis, snoring, all of these things, again, are self-protective mechanisms that we are not going to treat directly, but instead make them less necessary by improving your cellular metabolism. Emphysema is much like bronchitis since that it prevents carbon dioxide from escaping. The beauty of emphysema is that it's more of a long-term compensation. So in other words, if your anaerobic metabolism dominates for a long period of time, it takes a lot of energy for your body to constantly have to produce mucus. But eventually it just starts producing scar, and scar serves the same effect in the sense that it prevents loss of air. In the case of asthma, the lungs go into spasm and prevent the loss of air immediately. Another lung condition that is never even talked about is this whole shrinking of the lungs. Having a large lung capacity has its benefits. For instance, it allows you to be much stronger aerobically. The downside of having large lungs is that more air escapes, so that when your metabolism is inefficient, large lungs actually work against you. So nature has its way of shrinking the lungs, and this always seems to occur in especially young people who have a very anaerobic dominant metabolism. When the shoulders are being pulled forward as if you're blowing out a candle, there's a tendency to see that posture as being related to laziness, but more or less this is related to your metabolism. So again, these breathing and lung diseases are actually self-protecting mechanisms. When your cells are running anaerobically, they're inefficient and they produce acid. And your body has to sort of balance getting rid of that acid without getting rid of too much carbon dioxide. But the end result is that you stay alive as long as possible, even with your inefficient metabolism. What we want to do is not try to treat these diseases, but instead treat your overall conditioning. And we are presuming, and this is, by the way, constantly being validated, we are presuming that these diseases, when they become unnecessary, tend to go away.
My mom and 2 of my boys have asthma. I thought it was genetic.
The genetic component is that individuals have certain tendencies to develop certain diseases. But what's important to understand is that if you have one original error, in this case being inefficient metabolism, it can manifest in different ways based on your genetic tendencies. So one person with an inefficient metabolism will develop asthma, another bronchitis, another diabetes. And so we're not treating the asthma or the bronchitis or the diabetes, but we're attempting to treat the original problem. People tend to be fascinated with finding the genetic cause of diseases, but what they fail to understand is that they're really finding the genetic self-protection tendencies of people. And if you were to take those away, if you were to so-called fix the asthma gene, you'd end up with a person incapable of developing asthma, whose overall health would be worse, and you would force them to now develop more bronchitis, more diabetes, more cancer. So in the end, they won't have asthma, but they won't live as long and they won't be as healthy. So we're not trying to treat any of these diseases. We're trying to treat the original error that necessitates them.
Thank you for listening. For more information on the Frolov respiratory training device, go to healthbyyourself.net.